There are moments in history where silence feels louder than any declaration, where the absence of records speaks more forcefully than surviving chronicles. We are told the past is carefully preserved, faithfully copied, and responsibly remembered. Yet some eras feel strangely hollow, as if something vital was removed and the space it once occupied carefully smoothed over. In the early 14th century, a powerful presence vanished almost overnight. Not gradually, not through slow decay, but abruptly, violently, and with remarkable efficiency. According to official history, an entire institution, vast, wealthy, and deeply embedded in the fabric of Europe, was erased, its members condemned, its symbols outlawed, its name turned to ash. But what lingers is not the story we are given, it is the quiet that follows. There are sealed archives from this period, conflicting accounts, testimonies extracted under unbearable conditions. There are gaps where correspondence should exist, ledgers that end too neatly, roads that lead nowhere, and beneath it all, a sense that something unresolved was buried alongside the men who were condemned. Fog settles thickest where memory becomes dangerous, and some memories, it seems, were never meant to survive. If an order that spanned continents, commanded fleets, and managed fortunes truly disappeared, why does its absence feel so carefully maintained? And why does that silence still echo today? Before we go further, I want to gently ask something of you. These stories take a great deal of time, research, and care to assemble with honesty and restraint. If you find value in this kind of quiet exploration, and if you feel these questions deserve space to breathe, consider subscribing. It helps more than you might realize, and it allows this work to continue.
According to official history, the story appears simple. The Knights Templar rose during the Crusades as warrior monks, sworn to protect pilgrims and serve the church. Over time, they accumulated land, wealth, and political influence across Europe and the Mediterranean. Their power made them visible. Their independence made them vulnerable. We are told that King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt and increasingly wary of the order, acted decisively. On a single morning in October of 1307, Templars across France were arrested. Charges of heresy and blasphemy followed. Confessions were obtained. The papacy dissolved the order. Its leaders were executed. Its assets redistributed. Most of us grew up accepting this explanation. An institution became too powerful, crossed an unseen line, and was dismantled. History, we are assured, moved on. Yet even within this familiar account, questions quietly form. Does the speed of this collapse make sense? Does the completeness of the erasure feel realistic? And does the explanation truly feel complete to you?
The Templars were not a small sect operating in isolation. At their height, they managed estates across Europe, maintained fortified commanderies, and operated an international financial system that allowed funds to be transferred safely across borders. They answered only to the Pope. Their networks were complex, disciplined, and deeply entrenched. To believe they were entirely neutralized within a few years requires us to accept something unusual, that every branch complied, that no contingencies existed, that no records were hidden, no members escaped, no plans were made for survival. Thousands were arrested, but not all. Vast properties were seized, but not all were accounted for. Ships were listed, but some never reappeared. For an organization so meticulous, so structured, so prepared for crisis, the official narrative asks us to believe they had no second path. If this was truly the end, why does it feel so incomplete? And why does the scale of what was lost leave behind so little trace?
After the arrests, after the trials,
After the executions, one institution remained standing. It controlled the archives. It sanctioned the records. It determined which documents were preserved, which were copied, and which quietly disappeared. This does not require accusations. Power does not always need to destroy. Sometimes it only needs to decide what is remembered. When monasteries became libraries and scribes became historians, a filter was introduced. Events passed through authority before becoming truth. Silence could be as effective as censorship. When only one voice remains to tell the story, can history ever be neutral?
Knowledge rarely vanishes all at once. More often, it is thinned, simplified, delayed. Maps are redrawn. Some routes are emphasized while others fade. Languages evolve, and older texts become inaccessible to all but a few. Education narrows its focus. Archives are reorganized. Records are copied selectively. What survives is not always what mattered most, only what was permitted. We see this pattern repeated in legal codes that omit context, in theological debates that reference lost works, in financial practices that appear suddenly refined without visible development. How many times must information be filtered before its original shape is no longer recognizable? And how much can be removed before the absence itself becomes invisible?
While Europe entered a period often described as restrained and cautious, other regions followed different trajectories. Knowledge flowed openly through parts of the Islamic world. Mathematics advanced, astronomy flourished, libraries expanded rather than contracted. In Asia, engineering and navigation progressed steadily. In parts of Africa, trade networks preserved complex systems of record-keeping and oral history. The contrast is not one of superiority, but of continuity. While some cultures remembered, others seemed to forget. What happens when one part of the world pauses its memory while others move forward?
Some researchers suggest a theory that remains deeply debated, that the Templars were not entirely destroyed, but transformed, that fragments of the order dissolved into other institutions, that names changed, but knowledge endured. It is an uncomfortable idea, one that challenges the finality we are taught to expect. It does not claim a grand conspiracy, only adaptation, survival through obscurity. If even a small portion escaped, carrying documents, symbols, or traditions, would we expect to find clear evidence, or would we expect silence? Can such a theory be dismissed so easily?
Strange inconsistencies surface when we look across disciplines. Architectural designs appear with sudden sophistication. Symbols recur across distant regions. Calendrical reforms raise questions about lost measurements of time. Educational systems emerge with standardized structures that seem inherited rather than invented. Financial practices mirror older systems without acknowledging their origins. None of this proves continuity, but each anomaly nudges the same question from a different angle. At what point does coincidence begin to feel like pattern?
History is not only about the past. It shapes identity. It defines what we believe is possible. When narratives are simplified, so too are the boundaries of thought. If entire chapters can be removed, what does that teach us about authority, about memory, about trust? How much of who we are is shaped by what we were never told? And how often do we accept silence as certainty?
We may never know exactly what survived. Perhaps nothing did. Perhaps fragments lingered and slowly dissolved into legend.
Or perhaps some truths were never meant to resurface all at once. History does not always disappear. Sometimes it waits. In the quiet spaces between records, in unanswered questions, in the discomfort of uncertainty. If these stories resonate, if they leave you unsettled in a thoughtful way, stay curious, return for future explorations, and keep these questions alive.